Welcome to the Living to 100 Club podcast. Here's our host, Dr. Joseph Casciani.
Today's episode of the Living to 100 Club podcast, I welcome Nancy Cogar, an elder law and estate planning attorney, speaker, and host of the Boomer Time podcast. We'll explore how legal planning can support a fulfilling life in later years and provide a sense of control in uncertain times. With decades of experience advising older clients and families, Nancy offers practical, empowering guidance on topics like long-term care, financial decision-making, and how to prepare for life's transitions before a crisis hits. Today's listeners will hear why estate planning isn't just about wills and documents. It's about peace of mind, protecting independence, and communicating values across generations. First, a little background. Nancy Cogar, JD, is an elder law and estate planning attorney based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, with over 25 years of experience helping families prepare for life's transitions. She's the founder of Cogar Law and host of the Boomer Time podcast, where she educates and empowers older adults on topics ranging from financial planning to aging with dignity. Nancy is a passionate speaker and advocate, blending legal insight with a deep commitment to helping others age confidently and with purpose. Nancy, welcome to our program.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Great. I'm glad we could have this conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Me too.
So what drew you into elder law and estate planning as a professional focus, and how has your work evolved over the years?
Well, initially, I'm one of those type of people that sees a need and then responds to it. And I did, notice that elderly, senior, aging, they can be, they can be a lot of people that don't get much of a voice out in the community.
Sure.
They can be the ones that are struggling. You visibly see people struggling even when you're out and about. And it drew me to that. And then having the experience of even having aging adults in my own family, seeing how, well, quite frankly, stressful and challenging that can be, and just emotionally trying, I wanted to respond in some way that I could help others prepare for that kind of thing, because it's the type of thing most people don't think about until they're knee deep in, some kind of crisis.
Yeah.
And Dr. Joe, with the silver tsunami, so to speak, headed our way, there's going to be more and more people that find themselves in these kind of positions at that crossroads. What is my older life going to look like?
Yeah. So you've put yourself in a situation really to help with planning and preparation.
Absolutely.
I think that's what it's all about. With proper planning and proper steps in place, we can ease some of those challenges. As you say, we see challenges all the time. Can you give me an example or two of what you mean by the challenges you've observed?
Sure. Well, say you don't have powers of attorney, and things are not as easy as they used to be. That's just the way it is, right? And say, you think, well, I'm going to leave this to my son, or I'm going to leave this to my friend to be able to help me. Well, they don't have the authority to help you in those circumstances because you don't have an appropriate power of attorney. Whether it's healthcare and HIPAA laws and privacy laws, or if it's, trying to go to a bank to pay a bill. A bank is not going to let a third party come and access your financial accounts without some kind of legal authority. So these are things that need to be done, before you have an issue. Even with competency issues, that's one of those number one concerns of older adults is staying competent and not losing your function and memory. But you have to plan ahead because you need the capacity to make these types of decisions before. I see people who have waited so long that then they're faced to have the court direct what happens with their care through a guardianship or conservatorship. I'm sure you've seen a lot of that too. There's nothing more frustrating than, having to wait on a court to
Mm-hmm.
make decisions about your own assets, your own family. So,
Yeah, yeah, thanks. So things really are much more complicated
yeah,
today than just a couple of decades ago. A lot more regulations and laws in place really to protect us, but things that we can't handle overnight, right?
right,
Yeah.
right.
So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions or misunderstandings people have about estate planning and legal preparation in later life?
Well, I think one of those would be people thinking that they don't have enough to have a plan.
Hmm.
And I always tell people what you have is what you have, and you should protect it. It doesn't have to be as complicated as, say, a multimillionaire's estate plan. But
Hmm.
most of us do have real estate. Most of us do have bank accounts. You probably have an IRA or retirement account. If you're older, you have a pension. These are things that you want, first of all, want your family to know where they are. And then, secondly, have the ability to put something enforceable in place so that if something were to happen to you, then that gets directed the way you want it to
Hmm.
go.
Hmm.
Because the default is no matter what state you live in, if you don't do it yourself, then the state takes over, right? And
Yeah.
decides based on its own little schedule of inheritance who gets what. And I've seen situations where you've so many blended families, and I've seen situations where second wives or stepchildren, they get left out of the equation because they're not legal heirs of the person that's passed away. And there's
Hmm.
nothing more frustrating. But to go back to what I was saying initially, I think planning and having some kind of purpose for the things that you do have is just so important.
So, yeah, you mentioned the whole notion of kind of thinking that my assets, my estate, don't warrant this kind of
Mhm.
legal assistance and estate planning. So, is there, I mean, even with real estate or some IRAs or some pension, even that would qualify as I mean, that would warrant a need for some legal advice? Yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, I think this is an area of the law that people make a lot of assumptions. And if you don't have a beneficiary on something, you mentioned IRAs. So if you don't have a beneficiary on that, or say the primary beneficiary dies before you do, if there's no beneficiary, that's going to go into your estate, most likely. And there are laws now where you can roll those things over,
Mhm.
avoid taxable events,
Mhm.
leave portions for multiple people so that they can spread them over time. But if it goes into your estate is the one that's going to
Mhm.
bear the cost of that if it's liquidated, which is
Mhm.
most likely what's going to happen at
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
point. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it can cost you some significant money.
Mhm. Yeah. So the managing your estate, whatever size it is one of the steps, in addition to a lot of the other planning and preparation that we mentioned earlier about mm, power of attorney and healthcare directives and all of that. These are
Mhm.
all connected and these are all interconnected. I can see that
Mhm.
where it really matters to I think our satisfaction with growing old because I see so many times where people are dreading getting older and they see old age as a time of decline and dependency and helplessness and they don't see the upside. They don't see the positives that they have in front of them. And I think what you're talking about is that let's put some of these other pieces in place. Let's add these pieces to the puzzle, and that will give us some of the psychological peace of mind. What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, like you, I want people to maintain a high quality of life as they age. there's more and more people, 100 plus, and there's more of them to
Mm.
come. This is a growing population. And I have people sometimes come to me and say their whole objective is to avoid their money going to a nursing home.
Mhm.
And I say, your objective should not be a nursing home, first of all.
Mm.
That should be a last resort. I like to switch the conversation so that they can have that. I think it's called aging in place, but for lack of a better explanation, having a community where you can stay and you can have friends, maybe other, neighbors, things like that, that you know and trust, be able to make decisions for you. I mean, you can do that with these types of documents. And that is a much better quality of life to be able to maintain it, your place at home than have to go to institutionalized care. Then you're rethinking things about what's going to happen with your money. And as you know, that I'm sure it's more expensive in California, but you're seeing costs of $5,000 to $10,000 a month. So for most of my clients, they could wipe through a whole life savings within a year.
Sure.
And I think those are the things they don't know either. So when we sit down and have these conversations, I'm saying, what do you want your life to look like? What do you want to be able to do? Do you want to be able to stay mobile? Let's do some things inside your house that prevent you from falling,
Mhm.
because that can be such a detrimental thing. Um, you know, a lot of them sometimes are common sense things, but I
Sure.
think,
Sure.
we forget, especially with our own surroundings. We have little carpets around, things like that. And if you do an assessment, think
Yeah.
that carpet shouldn't be there. That can cost you
Sure.
one.
For
So,
sure. Yeah. Yeah. We have people who are real experts in those kind of
mhm,
safety plans and assessments of
mhm,
risks in the home. Yeah. And I really appreciate the concept of aging in place because that does offer a lot of the community, a lot of the support,
mhm.
aside from delaying, long-term care placement, whatever we can add to our own home to reduce the risk and help us to
Right.
stay there and age as long as we can there independently. So that's essential. What can you give us an example of some case or some family or an individual who's had enough missteps that really threw them off kilter and
Well, I
way
had
to go?
one
Yeah,
case. Well, I can think of two, and this
yeah.
probably might get people to raise their eyebrows a few, but these are just the kinds of things that I see, and I think, why didn't you call me before this happened?
Mm,
Um, but the first is had a married couple. It was a second marriage. Um, they were not, you know, elderly. They were in their 60s. They were in a home. It had been the husband's home prior to that. He had two children, stepchildren, that were not particularly fond of their new stepmom, but the husband and wife were in love and loved being in this home. Well, he died unexpectedly, and when he did not have a will,
mm.
and his primary asset was his house. So Tennessee law kicked in, and lo and behold, wife got a one-third child share of her home.
Oh, well.
She was not on the deed. And the other two stepkids came in and started working
Mm,
on moving things out and selling, and
mm.
it was really a regretful situation.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
just without a
And
will, intestate. Yeah.
yeah, and
Hmm.
here's another one.
Mm.
People love to put a child on a bank account with them. They think it's easier, it's more convenient. Well, he'll be fine there. Well, you're setting yourself up for so many things, whether it's that person gets a judgment against them and then they're levying against your bank account,
Mm.
or um, you die, and guess what? That bank account becomes theirs. That joint tenancy that vests
Mm.
upon death.
Wow.
So I had a I had a long time client, and he had significant funds. And his wife died, and thereafter I talked with him about updating his plan, excuse me. And he had a caregiver. He was very close with this caregiver. So, in spite of what I told him not to do,
Mm.
he went ahead and put his caregiver on all of his bank accounts.
Oh, good. Mm.
So when he died unexpectedly, caregiver then had close to $1 million, which was her property
Mm.
legally.
Well,
And that got the family's attention.
well,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, uh, how do you how do you step in, especially when the person is of, sound mind and able to make his own decisions, and
Right.
but there is that risk there of being vulnerable, and we don't know about exploitation, but there's always a risk there. Yeah,
Well, and then you've got people, like you said, that just plain don't take advantage of people and they
yeah,
get that
yeah,
access.
yeah, yeah. So,
And I see that a lot too, unfortunately.
yeah, of course, of course. What are some of the conversations? I mean, as we talk about planning and preparation, what are some of the conversations? What are the topics that families need to wrestle with to avoid crisis later on? What should they be
Well, I
talking
think
about?
I think sometimes it is having family members with challenges. If you don't particularly trust a child, what do you
Hmm.
do with that
Hmm.
child? Do
Hmm.
you want that child to be in charge of your assets? Do you want that child to be in charge of your estate?
Hmm.
More so, do you want them to get a large portion of money
Hmm.
just outright? So there are things you can do in planning where you can hold those monies in trust. You can have someone supervise distributions over time, which can be much more beneficial to a person like that
Hmm.
than giving them a big chunk of money, and it protects your estate. What about people that are disabled or have benefits that they receive through the government, and those are based on income. If you do not plan for that, you are going to, by giving them an inheritance or not doing anything, they're going to get booted off their benefits. And that can be
Hmm.
hugely disruptive, especially if
Hmm.
they're in a group home and say they're
Hmm.
mentally disabled, or you know a veteran that's receiving benefits through a program. If you don't plan, there's the danger of, it's not just about you, it's about the people that you leave behind. And
Hmm.
I think those are some of
Hmm.
those
Sure,
misconceptions.
sure.
They just don't know what they don't know.
Hmm. Well, it's also easy to avoid or postpone or delay these conversations.
Sure.
They're tough topics. They're tough topics when you're not sure about your children, if they're capable of managing your estate, or if you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and who's going to be involved. These are tough subjects for families to
A-
wrestle with.
Absolutely. And I tell people, if you can't make the decision now, then let's put something in place, and then we can always change it.
Mm,
We can
good.
think through
Mm,
these things,
sure.
put something in place so it protects against that main harm that might come, and we can adjust.
Hmm.
That's the other thing I see a lot, Dr. Joe, is
Mm,
people who have had a will that they've done, but it's 30 years old,
uh-huh.
and it talks about your kids and, having guardians for your kids and all this.
Mm,
Just,
yeah.
it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, it is. I think it's just tough to sit down and face these conversations because we know we're trying to postpone the inevitability of our death, and it's difficult. So I got a will. It's 30 years old, but it'll do. And
Yeah.
people just don't. It's difficult, and I think denial is very common. And believe me, I have a healthy respect for denial in older adults.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
I would work in nursing homes, and I would come home sometime. And one day I came home and I said to my wife, I said, I can't tell a difference between denial and positive thinking. And she said in her inevitable way, well, maybe there is no difference. Maybe positive thinking is
Perspective.
looking at only the good things that could happen and not considering some of the negative things. So it's hard. We can't take that denial away because that's a good way to, deal with the anxiety.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and to that, I sit down with people and I call my initial meeting with them more a strategy session because I want to know what they're concerned about, primarily. What's going on in their life? What does their family look like? What would they do if they could do it? So
mhm.
find out some of the things that they're thinking about generally. And then I tell them that, yes, we're talking about things that happen after you're gone. So,
Mhm.
I'll have a strange sense of humor
Yeah.
because I'm talking about death, dying, disputes about your stuff, and taxes. I'm
Mhm.
such a joy to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. Post.
But I try to, I try in that sense, I'm trying to be an advocate and
Mhm.
helping people
Mhm.
move through that process
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's coming, and I really want more people to have those things in place and be able to make decisions
Hmm.
and not be forced with here's the decision of what's going to happen to you because
Yeah.
you can no longer, ambulate and cook and take care of yourself. So now you're going into this room which you're sharing with a stranger,
Mhm.
and that's
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard.
Do you find it easier to take small steps in getting your clients to make these moves, or is it really necessary to kind of face them all at once and deal with it? I mean, I can see an advantage to both sides, but sometimes
Mhm.
the small steps make it easier to change behavior rather than a major sit down. Here's
Mhm.
all the things we need to settle today.
Well, I'm a big proponent in mindset. And I know that's a big part of what you do with your Living to
Mhm.
100 Club. I try to help people frame their mind in a better mindset as far
Mhm.
as what it is I'm trying
Mhm.
to help them
Yeah,
do.
good.
And I think that really helps. Sometimes there's some resistance. The other part of it is that's why I do the podcast,
Mm.
because I want people to hear from someone that just happens to be a lawyer but is talking like a human being about these
Mm.
issues that are just so complicated. Even when it comes to more children, adult children, usually daughters of older adults that are ending up in these caregiving
Mm.
positions. I mean, that is so stressful. And I've been there, but I want people to have some resources available to them so that they
Yeah.
know when something like that happens, what they can do,
Yeah.
and that they really need to take care of themselves. That's a piece that gets lost too.
Yeah.
So I think those are the kinds of things, just generally as more of an advocate, that
Mm.
I've put together in my
Mm.
daily practice,
Sure.
because I am concerned. This is not something that's just a situation in my state. It's worldwide,
Mm.
really, but the United States is one of those countries that we are going to feel it, and it's not going to be very long from now. I think
Mm.
it's 2030. There'll be more people over 65 than any other age group.
Mhm.
And we're already seeing crunches when it comes to finding appropriate care
Mhm.
outside of the home. So I
Mhm.
just don't think those things are really sustainable. And that's why I admire what you're doing. I think more of these communities, fostering those communities where we have someone that we know, trust, and can rely on, and have a
Mhm.
place where it's not in a hospital institutionalized kind of
Mm.
setting is
Yeah.
so much more healthy for people.
Yeah.
If they can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I think mindset is so powerful because, we can have a lot of talk in our heads, and the self-talk can be positive or negative or dreading or encouraging. So it's whatever that mindset is. So if you're addressing that, I think that's a smart move.
Mhm.
And it's also, as you touched on, kind of making the plans today avoids the crisis tomorrow because
Mhm.
if things happen suddenly, it's so hard to
Yeah.
make all the necessary moves after a stroke or after a fall or after,
Yeah.
some major loss, anything like that. So
Well,
that's
one of the places that I see referrals for, we call them conservatorships here, but guardianships of, adults that are um, then disabled is the hospitals.
mm,
Someone gets in a hospital and they're not able to go home and they don't have someone to care for them. The
mm,
hospital is, petitioning the court to put a conservatorship in
yeah,
place.
sure.
And
Yeah.
I don't want to see anybody get
Yeah.
in a situation like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the move of last resort. We don't have anything in
Right.
place. So here's where we are. Yeah. So you mentioned the podcast you do, Boomer Time Podcast. You've been doing this for some time, and what kind of insights have you learned after talking to your guests and your
Well,
listeners? Yeah,
we touch it all. So
yeah,
I've done everything from, the danger of doing do-it-yourself wills to how to leave something to your pet, um, which I do a lot of pet trusts.
oh wow,
People love their pets, and you know debacles at funerals and the stories of people that have just you know, done outlandish things at funerals, how you can protect against something like that happening, by putting something in place.
hmm,
Sensitive issues like driving, right?
hmm,
What's the difference between Medicaid and Medicare? I think there's so much confusion about that.
yeah,
And I just,
hmm,
there's so much to talk about, and I just trying to take it in tiny little pieces where I can share stories, and then some wisdom.
hmm,
And I think that does translate on, a more general basis where hopefully people are able to take some things away and say,
hmm, sure,
yeah, that makes sense. I need to
yeah,
do something about that.
yeah,
I need to go talk to my parents about X, and
hmm,
have the conversation as it needs to be framed, not you're losing your mind, mom, and we got to put
hmm,
you in a
yeah.
going to put
Come
you
with
in
me, yeah,
assisted living.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's not going to go over
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. Well, I agree. It's so much of it is all about education. We know a lot
Mhm.
about living longer and proper healthy aging, steps to take, and the
Mhm.
more information we can share and learn from one another, I think the more informed decisions we can make.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
I love sharing stories
Yeah.
too of some of the lives, the journeys that, now older adults have lived.
Mm.
I so admire the communities where they cherish their older
Mm.
adults
Sure.
as being wise and being experienced and things like that. And so, those stories are disappearing in a lot of respects. So I
Hmm.
try to have people on that I know or that I think are interesting and
Yeah.
share some time with them.
Hmm. Yeah, we learn a lot from stories, don't we?
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
We can share them and we can learn as well.
yeah.
So I know when we spoke earlier, you had this desire or this goal to be more of a kind of an advocate for older adults
Mhm.
beyond your practice. I mean, you're doing remarkable work and helping
Oh,
older
thank you.
adults and families. What do you what do you aspire to in terms of a advocate for seniors?
Um, well, this might seem crazy, but I tell you,
Yeah.
I would love the opportunity to travel around and just have larger groups of people where we
Mm,
could talk about people's concerns, whether it's a town hall, whether it's a meeting, in
mm,
a facility where we can decide what might be a better idea, because I really think that most of what we're doing right now ain't going to work in the long run.
Mm, mm,
And I think that people who are in those circumstances, you can learn a lot from them. You know, whether it's about accessibility, whether it's about perception, you know, whether it's about their
mhm,
daily struggle. So I would really like to incorporate more of that in
mm.
my
Sure.
advocacy work because I just see the number of people that are just don't understand, and I don't want them to get stuck, you know, 10 years from now,
Mhm,
15 years from now, because the options for them at that point will be considerably less, in
mm,
my opinion. And if we don't do something about, you know, changing the way we get around, making it more accessible,
mm,
making housing more community friendly as far
mm,
as, you know, older adults, I think it gets harder to do that later on.
mhm.
Um, so, you
Yeah,
know, maybe I'm too much of an optimist, but, you know,
not at all. Not at all. No, no, no.
yeah,
Mm.
I've got a couple clients that come to see me and they're sharp as tacks. One's 93, the other's
Uh-huh.
94, you
Yeah.
know, and then I had two brothers that came in, their 98-year-old sister died and they served as co-executors. They were 94 and
Yeah.
96. I
Yeah.
just love it. You know, I just
Yeah.
love it. And
Yeah.
I want to be able to be a support to people like that,
Mm,
you know, it's
mm,
just, and the ones that are struggling, of course,
mhm.
but they need to be celebrated. You know, that's
Sure.
just,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
that they've seen a lot. So,
Put the spotlight on their successes and their
mhm.
strengths. Yeah. Well, don't hesitate. I mean, keep on moving. That's a great aspiration. It's not an
Thank you.
aspiration. It's something that you just want to keep working at and growing and
Oh, I
reaching,
appreciate that.
stretching. Sure. Yeah. So, can you give one takeaway that you hope our listeners remember from this conversation?
I think that anything you want, anything you aspire to, you know, if you're 50 years old, it's not over. You know, you got a whole nother 50 plus years potentially
Mhm.
available for you. What kind of life do you, you know, I would ask you, what kind of life do you want to lead moving forward? You know, what do you need to do to make that life possible? And what do you need to change in order to support that
Mm.
um, dream?
Yeah.
You know, I see a lot of people that are don't have much mobility, you know, then that gets harder to do things. But I think if we are at a crossroads, which road do we want to take? Because it really is a choice, right?
Sure.
Really is a choice.
Sure.
And the other thing I would say is don't assume that you don't need something.
Mm.
Find somebody. I'm not saying go to, you know, Mr. $99 a will deal down the
Mhm.
street,
Mm.
but find somebody that will talk with you, that will answer questions, that you understand when they're telling you something, and get something in place. It
Mm.
doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't have to be expensive, but put something in place because it's going to protect you
Mm.
and it's going to protect your loved ones.
Sure.
And I just think that's so, so important.
Great. That's great. Great advice. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. So, how can people learn more about your work? Tell us about, do you have a website and tell us about your podcast?
Sure, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I do have a website and it is nancycogar.com. That's my name, nancycogar.com. You can find a lot of information about me there. You can find my podcast. It's a weekly podcast, so we try to cover an issue a week. Um, I'm looking forward to having you on my
Yeah.
podcast as well.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got a lot of resources there. I'm kind of a resource junkie, but I do find that so many people have trouble finding answers, even basic answers,
Mm.
that I'd never assume that they don't need that information. So I usually put resources there, and you can get in touch with me there too.
Mm-hmm.
if you want me to come share at an event, a community event, whether it's big or small, you can get in touch with me there about that. And
Mhm.
if you're, in my region, you're welcome to contact me there, and you can come in and we can talk about, you know, uh, what you got going on, and what
Mhm.
we might do to change that.
Yeah,
So I appreciate that very much.
great.
And Boomer Time, like I said, it's on it's on YouTube. I got to remember all this. YouTube. It's on my website. It's on Spotify,
Mm.
iHeartRadio. We're growing, so and I'd
Yeah.
appreciate people check it out. And if you like it, subscribe and share with a friend. So
Hmm. Great. So nancycogar.com and Boober Time is the podcast. Now, I take it you are limited to providing legal counsel to states where you're licensed, which is mainly
correct. Yeah.
Tennessee. So if people contact you from another state, you really can't provide any legal information, of
Not
course.
specifically. I do know a lot of other lawyers that
Uh-huh. Okay.
um, I had someone I referred to in Nevada recently.
Mhm.
So, um, there it. If you send me an email, sometimes I can make a connection for you.
Sure.
But
Sure.
that is true. So
Yeah.
from my lawyerly standpoint,
Yeah.
I need to stay within my limits. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm aware of that as a psychologist.
yeah,
Uh, needs to be licensed in the state where you're providing services. So,
correct. Hmm.
yeah, and you have many other resources though on your website, so people can always access those resources. Yeah.
Absolutely. I hope they do. So, and if there's something there that you're looking for that's not there, I
Mhm.
love hearing from people. So, reach out, and it may make a great podcast. So,
Great. Okay, nancycogar.com. Well, Nancy, thanks so much for this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure my audience enjoys it as well. Yeah. Looks like
well,
we're
I
out of,
appreciate it.
yeah, good, good. Excuse me. Looks like we're out of time for today. But before we wrap up, I just want to remind my listeners to visit my website, living200.club, for my blogs and my podcast library. You can visit my new community for connection and experiences. That's at living200.community. And if you're part of a senior living community, don't miss my Better, Longer, and Happier card deck series. You'll find this at living200.solutions with 12 different modules. It's a tool for promoting wellness, growth, and conversation. Nancy, thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. Hope to see you next time.